Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the fifth episode of Islamicity Weekly. Joining us, as always, is my co-host, Hassan Labuskakhni. And today we are joined by two very important guests, Shaykh Ebrahim Moosa of Palestine Information Network and Brother Arshad Samodien of Youth for Al-Quds. We will be discussing, are South African Muslims betraying Palestine? The crux of this discussion, inshallah, is to look at how we can heighten our activism for the liberation of Al-Aqsa, of Al-Quds, and the whole of historical Palestine for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We will be looking at our wins, our losses, what can we improve on, what have we done well on, and how we can take the struggle forward so that inshallah, within the near future, within this generation, we will see a liberated Masjid al-Aqsa and a free Palestine, inshallah. Gentlemen, welcome. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Shukran jazilan for joining us. We're quite honored to have the both of you with us, both of you coming with many years of consistent, disciplined activism and struggle for the liberation of Palestine, always been at the forefront, keeping the struggle alive on many fronts. We see the fantastic work that is being done by, for example, if I may say, Palestine Information Network, and being that resource, that intellectual resource, not just an ideological resource, but that intellectual resource to conscientize the Muslim community and others when it comes to Masjid al-Aqsa and when it comes to the larger question of Palestine. Youth for Al-Quds has been very, very vociferous against Zionism. The late Sheikh Maulana Ihsan Hendricks, rahimullah, who I believe, to my understanding, was one of those that played a significant role with Youth for Al-Quds, used to always highlight the threat that Zionism posed to the Ummah and to the entire world. Was always very passionate about talking about Palestine and keeping the Palestinian question alive. Brothers, we are now looking at 77 years since the Nakba. This year, 2025, according to the Gregorian calendar, marks 77 years since the existence of the Zionist apartheid Israeli state of Israel. It is a shame and a blight on the whole of humanity, and not just the Muslim Ummah, but the Muslim Ummah specifically, that in the very heartland of Islam, where the third Haram resides, the land of the Isra, there exists an entity which is highly Islamophobic and which is bent on the destruction of Islam, Muslims, and the conquering of Muslim lands, and the replacing of Islam as the law of the land, replacing it with a system that basically and essentially represents Jahiliyyah. 77 years on, we'd like to engage you. What are your thoughts and where are we going in this legitimate struggle for Palestine?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. First of all, Jazakumullah khairan for also allowing me to be part of this great panel. Always great to be close, even if it's online, to my dear brother and Ustad Ebrahim Moosa. And it takes me back all the way to 2011, when the two of us were part of the Africa 1-8 convoy to Gaza, spearheaded by the late Maulana Ihsan Hendricks and other leaders in our community, rahimahullah. And I recall so vividly that when we entered Gaza at Maghrib time, it was the last day of Ramadan, and we broke our fast on the Gaza side of the border. And we didn't know that time, or after Maghrib, we found out it's actually the last day of Ramadan. Tomorrow will be Eid, so we'll be celebrating the night of Eid and Eid in Gaza. And the way we were welcomed that same night in the masjid by the leader of Hamas and of the government in Gaza, Shaykh Ismail Haniyeh, rahimahullah, that night, and subsequently all the way till now, how Palestinians view South Africans and Muslim South Africans tells me that even the title, even though it is put out to pique the interest, that in fact Muslims have not been betraying the cause or disloyal or harming the cause, Muslims from South Africa. I would say to a large extent, no, exactly the opposite. Just recently, in the last year, whenever I've met Palestinians in South Africa and outside of South Africa, when you say that you are from South Africa, immediately they put you on a very high pedestal. For example, even the government taking the occupation state of Israel to the ICJ, it is seen as a win on behalf of the Muslims of South Africa. Muslims of South Africa are immediately lauded and praised and thanked, that your government and you people took when no one was prepared to do it, you guys did it. And I was at the Palestine conference recently that brought together, lots of supporters of the resistance and Palestine NGOs. And I was wearing at some point my South African scarf. And, when they see the colors, they are just, so much thankful of South African for what we are doing. But of course, we want to be a bit more critical in this session. But I think to a large extent, overall, South Africans are thanked, and the Muslims have been playing a good role.
If I may, Sheikh Ebrahim, we would love to hear your take on it, specifically because I've noted sort of a disparity between Cape Town, where myself and Brother Arshad are, and Johannesburg. There's on multiple issues. There's just there tends to be a few cultural differences. There's a different vibe. People tend to have slightly different attitudes towards different things. So I wanted to pick the interest of someone who's not in Cape Town. Is it the same? Do you experience it the same way, or is there a different different kind of sentiment from outside of Cape Town?
So, Sheikh Hassan, I think Jazakallah khairan once again to yourself and Sheikh Anwar and Islamicity for this discussion. When we look at this year being 77 years since the Nakba, just to start off on that particular point, I think we could misread the situation, whereby people could say the scenes that we are witnessing in Gaza today are very much reminiscent of the Nakba. Look at Tantura, look at Deir Yassin, look at all the massacres that were committed for the state of Israel to come into being. And what we're seeing now is almost an exact replica of what has occurred. And through that, we might get a kind of false perception that we haven't moved, this cause hasn't moved an inch since 1948 until this particular point in time. But contrast this to the fact, if we just look at it in that very limited sense, with a myopic sense of vision, that's the idea that you would get. But look at the development internally and externally that has occurred, and one would then change one's perception of where we stand. The first from 1948 until 1967, things get worse with the Naksa of 1967, but then you get the reawakening 40 years later, which is significant according to the Islamic scholars, that occurs in 1987 with the rise of the Islamic-inspired resistance in Palestine. And now, in 2025, we find that resistance coming of age, and the fruits of the tarbiyah of the likes of Sheikh Ahmed Yassin being reaped amongst Palestinians, and that now inspiring a global intifada at this particular point in time. So if we appreciate that Palestinians have gone through waves of struggle, this has strengthened them, and this has strengthened their organizational capacity, and also has shaped their worldview in a different way from where it was one of victimhood in 1948 until now, then we'd appreciate that we are actually in a much more different space than we were at the time of the Nakba 77 years ago. Now, to the crux of this discussion, Sheikh Hassan and Sheikh Anwar and Brother Arshad, I think we need to appreciate that in a time, I'd feel, just to maybe discuss the sentiments of Sheikh Arshad, we feel very satisfied, and the kind of sentiments that would come from visiting scholars and the kind of sentiments that would come from people around the world who genuinely, and Palestinians genuinely, hold South Africans in admiration for what we've done, or what our society has done, or what our leadership has done. Fine enough, but when we find that the genocide is still continuing, and when we find, as we speak, Gaza is, over 70 days without food entering Gaza at all, I humbly do not think at this moment in time we can bask in the praise. Even if we are doing all that we can, the fact that the genocide is still ongoing with us watching it means that we cannot bask in that praise. And genocide, I've just emphasized this so many times recently, that genocide, we've taken it to be an adjective. Whether it is an adjective in some sense is a technical point, but genocide is meant to be a kind of SOS. Genocide, it means something that requires emergency action to be able to stop it. So regardless of everything great that has been done, we use that as a foundation to be able to move forward and learn from what we've done and appreciate what we've done so far. But we can never, ever be self-satisfied at a moment like this. And finally, relating to your point about Johannesburg and Cape Town, firstly, I think let's just appreciate the demographics, the demographical differences between the two, that Cape Town has the largest Muslim population in South Africa versus while it's a vociferous, while it is a very assertive Muslim population in places like Durban and Gauteng, we are certainly don't have the numbers perhaps to be able to sometimes, in terms of physical action, create that visible impact. But I think a big difference between the two, respectively, so I say this, and I could be correct, is number one, leadership. And I think the leadership under the likes of Sheikh Nazim previously in the MJC, Maulana Hassan Hendricks, etc., have made Palestine into a cultural issue in the Western Cape, whereby it just becomes part of people's blood and DNA. That same tarbiyah, I would argue, hasn't happened in Gauteng. Deeply. And secondly, in terms of leadership, we have in terms of the public action, the fasting, in terms of the solidarity marches, you have the MJC, for example, leading from the front, and we do not find that, I think, in the other parts of the country.
Shukran, Ibrahim. Basically, like you said, genocide is a red button. It's an emergency button, and it's an issue of urgency. And we don't want to lambast the South African Muslim community. And yes, alhamdulillah, our brothers and sisters from many other parts of the world, Palestine included, when they meet us or hear of us, they're genuinely happy, about what we have done and are continuing to do for Palestine, and grateful. And all praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are nothing but a means. But it's like you said, it's about urgency right now. And we know that there are differences between the Western Cape and the rest of the country. And I really appreciate the fact that how you've outlined that it has the question of Palestine has been turned into a very significant cultural issue in the Western Cape. So, but we are at this point now, for example, where we're doing good. We've taken the South African government, and Muslim community is going to take the win for this, is that we have broken the fear factor, and no one ever took the Zionists to court, especially not on an international stage. And here the South African community has taken the Zionists to court, and alhamdulillah for that. But with that said, there's still South Africans serving in the IDF, and with that said, there's still Muslims who are drinking Coca-Cola and buying McDonald's.
Shukran to Ustad Ebrahim for also just complementing the discussion on where the South African Muslim community support lies and how we need to frame it. And definitely right. Let me just start off there. As much as I know the Palestinian community and others, want to thank us, perhaps because we are so far off and such a small minority that perhaps that is also why there is some, praise, for this little community so far off in the world that is seemingly doing, something perhaps punching above their weight, perhaps. When we come to the issue of the boycotts and about just before Ramadan, I went to one of the Muslim-owned supermarkets that I frequent, and I actually put it out from the youth for Al-Quds as a challenge that everyone goes to visit the supermarkets and the shops that they frequent and approach them with this exact point or this exact request. We are now at a point where we need to take a bolder stance. We are now at a point the genocide has continued for 18 months. That was not 2 months ago. And we need to take a much firmer stance. We're still having the Cokes and the Nestle and the Clover and all of these big labels and brands on our shelves. What big, how can these supermarkets make a big stand for the cause? And I'm speaking to you from the angle or the perspective from a Muslim business that is well supported in the Muslim community and that supports the Muslim causes. And I'm speaking to the owner, and he says, and he's very welcoming that I come to speak to him about the topic, but he makes the following points. He says years ago, a group also came to him, also asking to boycott. Boycott Coke, take off Coke off the shelves, and for 1, 2, 3, 4 reasons. And he says they did that. But what they found was their sales dropped dramatically because a so-called main item was taken off the shelves. So the Muslim customer base who was looking for that product would then go to other supermarkets and then buy it there, and then subsequently maybe buy a lot of their other shopping over there. So he said he anticipated, he expected doing this big thing that now the community is going to stand by him and come and stand and support him, but that didn't happen. And then on top of that, after a while, he saw, in another, store, people that, that came to ask him to take this product off the shelf, being part of those buying the same products at other stores. And so he said because of that previous experience, he's not going to do this immediately. But even though he himself doesn't use the product, even he himself and his family boycotts the product, but he says, they need to stock it. So I'm still unpacking that, and I'm thinking perhaps because I went alone, and he didn't perhaps know me that well, I thought perhaps I should be coming with a group of leaders, of the community, and then show that support, and then show them the importance of doing this, and then perhaps it would be we have a better outcome from the Muslim business perspective, and then from the consumer perspective. I think maybe some people didn't stop boycotting or didn't start boycotting in the first place. I know, there are so many that was boycotting even before October 2023, and that has only increased, to boycott even more products. And we know of people that started boycotting, and that has, especially the big brands, your McDonald's, KFC, Burger Kings, and all of that. You hear that when you go to families, and kids will say, I haven't had a KFC meal since, for almost 2 years, or since October 2023. And at the same time, sometimes when you do go into some restaurants and you see Muslims, still buying a Coke or these products, and then you see that our reach perhaps hasn't, we haven't reached everyone. Perhaps the message hasn't come loud and clear to everyone. Perhaps it's some people are so set in their ways. Perhaps it's a big step for some people to take. So we need to, and I think also it speaks to the issue or the fact that us as a Muslim community in South Africa are not acting in unison, are not acting uniformly on many important issues. So I think the issue of Palestine and Masjid al-Aqsa, we always said it's an issue that galvanizes and unites and brings the community and people together. I think we should now also really look at how we direct the messaging, how we direct our action to bring people closer together. Because there's another issue, and that is, for example, the keyboard. That some would like to call keyboard warriors. But I mean, speaking about the issue and confronting others and Zionists online, nowadays we are seeing in the Muslim chat groups or in the internal chat groups, people are having days and days and sometimes weeks of internal fighting on points that that doesn't need an argument to begin with. And not using their energy, or directing it where it should be. So I think perhaps there's also a big issue of unity and using this issue of the Ummah to unite us the way it should be. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah khairan for Arshad, and that experience I think that you've spoken about of having to getting that first-hand feedback from consumers and that first-hand feedback from business owners is so valuable, because we might characterize the problem in a particular way, but we'll only be able to deal with the challenges if we actually get the on the ground feel of what is going through people's minds and what motivate them to take a particular decision or not. So I'll start off just emphasizing that point, which is I think anecdotally we would see from public functions, from consumption at home, that certain products definitely have become a taboo, or they frowned upon, at least to appear in public spaces. And obviously Clover and Coca-Cola would be at the top of that list. But having said that, I think just to echo what Arshad is saying in a different way, I'd feel in plotting, making an assessment of anything, we need a bit better data. And that's why it's always important to gauge, to poll, to get the views of consumers, and that would be able to, assist us to be able to, react to these phenomena in a better and a more informed way. Having said that, I've always also emphasized the point that where we were at the beginning of the genocide and where we are 18 months on requires a change in mindset and requires progress. So if we started off with a certain amount of products on a targeted boycott, we 18 months on certainly have to reevaluate that. Are we still going to be only talking about Coca-Cola as an emblem and Clover and as an Israeli product, or are we going to broaden the scope, number one, and also bring in a wider discussion in terms of financial empowerment of the community? Because I feel these two have to come, work hand in hand, to dissociate ourselves from the corporations of the world and to empower proudly South African, to empower local businesses, to empower Muslim businesses, etc. So I'm just saying that we cannot be still on the starting blocks of this discussion in terms of these limited amount of products. 18 months on, we have to evaluate what is the next step in our boycott. Thirdly, I'll talk about business people. So a lot of the appeal from the activist groups has been towards individual consumers. And all of us are individual consumers in one way or the other. But again, from what Arshad has said, there's a greater need to be able to, mobilize together and be able to pitch this call at business owners, because if there is certainly a noticeable drop in the amount of people using these products, why still the need to be able to stock these particular products? And I'm talking on a bigger scale as well. Your cash and carries, there's some really huge Muslim distributors that could make a big dent in the profits of these compromising companies if they are targeted. Lastly, let me just say that there's the importance here of communities who have been successful. And I take an example, I'm not sure if they've kept up the success, but there's a community in Lodium who proudly, through their counselor, a Muslim counselor from the ANC, had put up a board at the entrance of their town, which said this is a clover-free zone. But they had a strategy behind it whereby they brought the business people on their side. They went to all the businesses in town and they said, we do not want to boycott you. Our target is not boycotting your shop and your shop and your retailer. Our target is boycotting Clover. So be our partners in this. We are going to make this pitch to the community, and as a result, they are not going to be buying this from your stores. So stock an alternative. But in that process, the business people brought forward certain ideas. For example, they said, we have X amount of Clover stock that we've paid for and is still on our shelves. Give us 3 months so that we can clear the stock out, and then you can amplify this campaign further. And through that kind of discussion, they brought the business people on their side and brought the community on their side, and they've been successful so far. Recently, I heard an amazing story in Azadville, for example, a community where a group of concerned ulama basically, took out a unified khutbah on boycott, amongst other things. They identified a targeted boycott. And for the first time I've heard this, they've physically gone door to door in the community, and they covered about a quarter of the community so far, asking people individually to boycott these products. So I'm saying these experiences of different communities, especially where they've been successful, is going to be helpful to be able to expand this boycott movement all across South Africa. And lastly, let us celebrate our successes, because a person can always be in denial. The boycotts are not working. So many people have abandoned the boycott, but these are just sentiments that may not be anchored in fact. And for us to sustain and move forward the boycotts, we always have to, highlight individual cases. I gave up Clover for the past two years. I'm Coke free for the past 6 months. Highlight those particular stories or new businesses who've come on board, and that will be an incentive, inshallah, for others to also, join and expand the boycott.
I love what you're saying, Sheikh Ebrahim. This is amazing. And these success stories are brilliant, mashallah. Of, for example, what had happened in Lodium, or, that Pretoria area. Because you know what they say, I mean, whether it's Lodium, Erasmia, Eldo Rain, yes, all of that is part of the greater Lodium metropolitan area. I love what you're saying, mashallah. But they also seen a type of schizophrenia, in the Muslim community. And I'm going to use Muslim businessmen as an example. There are many of them, mashallah, that they're doing really well in terms of the boycotts. They're willing to work with the Muslim community, work with activist organizations, because they're part and parcel of the community. The hurt of the ummah is their hurt. There's no doubt about that. But you can walk into a store and they're selling the alternatives to Coca-Cola and Clover, but they're still stocking Coca-Cola and Clover and other products. And when you ask them about this, they'll say, we have the Coke for those that want the Coke and the Clover and the Nestle, and for those that are that are boycotting, then we're also stocking for them. So it's a type of schizophrenia, because we know that their primary identity is one of Islam. So this is something that, I mean, it needs to be dealt with, in a much more. I like what you're saying about sitting down with business people and having those very frank, open, supportive conversations. But we really have to turn up the heat on this one. Shukran.
I think that you'd have a mixture then between the carrot and stick approach. And again, I think sometimes the stick approach would, again, we're not seeking to make people within our communities the enemy. I think that needs to be emphasized. The enemy is the occupier. The enemy is the genocidal state and its immediate supporters. But it basically defeats the point of a boycott to be able to still you still stock those products and stock alternative products. So there needs to be waves of engagement. If people continue to be stubborn in a particular way, then a different mode of engagement with that particular business owner can be used. So I'm in agreement with you there that in a moment like this, we cannot just accept the bare minimum as the benchmark to be able to deal with this genocide.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Ibrahim and Brother Arshad. I like what Brother Arshad mentioned, that mentioned that anecdote about visiting a Muslim businessman and pitching this idea to him about boycotting certain products, and then being met with that response which he mentioned. And I think this shows us that even though business people need to be conscientized and need to be approached in terms of what products they stock, if you think from a businessman's perspective, they are looking at profits, and that is dependent on demand. So they look at what there's demand for in the community, and so they're going to stock those products for which there is a demand. So perhaps more attention should be given to consumers, like you've mentioned, Sheikh Ibrahim. Consumers need to be conscientized with regards to these products and what they are actually funding. Because as long as there's a demand for products like Coke and Clover, business people are going to be there to stock that. And then also, as long as if that demand remains, even though the business people might boycott it, those Muslim consumers are going to take their business to other brands or other vendors who might be directly complicit in the genocide. So they might go to your Cape Union Marts, or they might go to other businesses that have direct links with Israel and with genocidal regime there. So I think that it's definitely important that we focus on consumer conscientization. But we're speaking a lot about boycotting. Sheikh Ibrahim, if you will, and Brother Arshad, I'd like to hear your side on this as well. Aside from boycotting, we know BDS is a big name in the resistance, global Palestine solidarity efforts. BDS is on every banner. Boycotting is at the forefront of resistance efforts everywhere and solidarity efforts. But aside from boycotting, what is the South African Muslims toolkit to assist the resistance or to support Palestine solidarity? Aside from just boycotting, what is our toolkit? What kind of means do we have to utilize as South African Muslims?
Just to pick up on one point, Sheikh Hassan, before I go to that, and I won't be long on this. I think just touching on the last point of Sheikh Anwar, which is when one gets needs to be able to make a stronger pitch to business people. I think here we have an issue. Sometimes it needs to, the Islamic stance on this needs to be more strongly emphasized. So people would always be concentrating on whether something is halal or not, and leaving it at that baseline. I think we need to raise the bar to be able to say, perhaps in certain cases this might be actually close to haram to dabble in these goods. But more than that, whether a thing is technically halal or not, you also have the issue of what is ethical and what is tayyib, according to our faith. And sometimes when we keep the benchmark so low, we actually fail to realize that we have higher standards in our faith that we need to be upholding, especially in a time of genocide. What else is in our toolkit? I think there's a variety of things. Last year, we had prepared a document which was called a Gaza introspection guide, and we looked at everything from the spiritual responses that are required in a time of genocide to the physical actions that are required. There's so many ideas that are contained in that, based on the discourses of so many activists and scholars. So I can't enumerate all of that, but Arshad mentioned earlier this idea of so many people who are keyboard warriors, and I say keyboard warriors in a positive sense. There would be those who would be directing their vitriol in the wrong direction, but there would be so many people who are active in the different solidarity groups that have been created. But then we'd always ask the question, sometimes from the 1,000 people or a couple of hundred people who are present on these groups, when it comes to a physical mobilization, we find that only a percentage of those people actually get involved in certain cases. So recently, I received some advice from a member of an advocacy body as well, saying that let's try to channel some of these energies, number one, into letter and email writing campaigns. Now, for example, you have these politicians who've returned from the paid junket to Israel, to occupied Palestine. This is an opportunity to firstly engage with them. Some who are misinformed, engage with their parties, engage with Muslim members of, for example, the Democratic Alliance. So there's so much engagement that needs to occur. Nobody really has taken up this engagement. Business people or higher companies, in South African companies that are complicit in some way in terms of ties with Israel, to be able to write to them. And the next idea beyond letter writing is research and data. I mentioned, for example, the fact of our boycotting in South Africa. What is the exact extent to which we are boycotting? All of this would be valuable research to be able to then make informed decisions as solidarity movements. Compile evidence of South Africans, add to the evidence of South Africans who are in the IDF, write to government, or try a private prosecution of them under international law. Find out, there's a lot of research that can still be done of which companies in South Africa are buying and selling from Israel. The trade is still happening, but we just know the raw figures. But who is actually involved in this particular trade? Write policy proposals for university bodies and get people to do something for 20 or 30 minutes a day. All these people who are in these groups, who are active, who are pumped up, let's give them some direction to be able to take up some of these tasks.
Arshad, is there anything you'd like to add to that very comprehensive breakdown of our toolkit as South Africans and as South African Muslims for solidarity efforts?
MashaAllah, Jazakumullah khairan. And definitely the Palestine Information Network is, one of the leaders in this regard. And I think so many South Africans and others are using the resources that is being put out there for this exact purpose. I think a lot of it has to do, with education and education. And sometimes not by education, we don't mean only the sharing of information, but education in terms of also convincing people. The education also of making people aware of the effects and the effects of what they are and what they are not doing. I think a great campaign, for example, in Cape Town that we see, I haven't maybe traveled too extensively nationally in the last 2 years, but I see there's so many, for example, besides the murals on many of the homes and walls, so many cars have, just been put a Palestine, free Palestine, or long live Palestine, or, a sticker in the back window or on the car, and some people have done even more than that to their vehicles, for example. And we saw even when Palestinians come in to visit us over the last 2 years, how they would take a picture of every car that they see with a Palestine sticker on, for example. I think why we're focusing so much on the issue of boycott is because of the great impact that it can have, and it's such a big a weapon that we have at our disposal. We cannot forget to remember how much the BDS campaign against apartheid South Africa, from a global aspect, globally led or was instrumental to leading the charge and the campaign to the downfall of the apartheid regime in South Africa. and it's a way of daily contributing to the struggle and the cause and supporting this just cause. Every day when I go to a shop or when I choose not to spend my 10 rand here, but to spend it on a product that doesn't support the genocide, doesn't support the occupation. So it's something I can do physically every day. And a means of support, and we know the Islamic Muslim scholars have mentioned that this is almost like a jihad bil mal, struggling and fighting, with your money. So it's something that people can do every day. I had a young student visitor to South Africa from one of the Gulf countries, one of the Arab Gulf countries last year. And we know, for example, even the issue of marching, it's not allowed from a government perspective. People are not allowed to march for any aspect. And obviously now, by extension, people are not allowed to march and protest publicly for Palestine, even in the Arab Gulf states. And the issue of BDS hasn't gone as publicly and as loudly, for example, in those states. I was so taken aback. I was so impressed. I was so amazed. The 16-year-old in South Africa, and we were in charge of their visit to South Africa, so we took them to different places. And this the 16-year-old is in a mall. He takes a picture of a brand and he sends it to me because I'm on the other side of the mall, and he sends me a picture of this brand and he asks me, Arshad, does this brand support the occupation? And I'm thinking, in a country, he's coming from a background where they're not allowing any public symbols of support, for this just cause, and public symbols of the resistance. But look how deeply he's affected by it, and he doesn't want to spend these 500 or 1,000 rand in the shop in South Africa where nobody knows him. He's just here on a visit. And the brand, the people maybe not even know that brand when he gets back home. He doesn't want to spend that rands on a company that support and complicit in the genocide. So I was really, impressed and amazed by such a young man doing this. So and that, I suppose, that is why we are, impressing on the point. So I think perhaps a takeaway point after this discussion is how do we amplify this in our own community? I like what somebody recently said. So all of us are involved in, organizations and groups, and we're trying to put the message. We're trying to speak to people too many times that we don't know personally. Right? Whether it is in our articles, in our online presence, in our speaking at public events, we're speaking to gatherings and the groups, and we're trying to convince and convey a message. And in another setting, I've heard more than once now that that da'wah should be directed closer to home. How many times have I spent, that 20 minutes or that consistent effort on my own family, my own cousin chat groups and my own family events, and I'm going to use a few minutes and I'm going to check, like Shaykh said, on the polls and that, am I going to check where's my family at? In terms of whether it's the boycott or coming out to the march or the online presence. So I think definitely two things. I think we need to, after this chat, inshallah ta'ala, use this in terms of how do we can be much stronger in the BDS movement in South Africa, because this is, it's definitely a weapon, if we can say that, the global community can use at the time that they are, trying to close off every way for people to reach and for aid to reach. We should definitely not spare any effort to boycott every product that we can. But I think now we should direct the message closer to home. Every activist, every leader, every person should look in. As much as we are, projecting our message far and wide, we need to, make sure that our own base, inshallah, is in order, or work on our base, meaning my close family, my extended family, and we can say my masjid, my neighbors, my groups, and that type of thing, inshallah.
Shukran for that. And I like what you're saying about, whoever is closest to you, starting to work with them. And yes, the international scene is very important, but the local scene too. And that brings us to another area of discussion that's necessary, and that is the members, the manabir, the members within this country, the length and breadth what is taking place in our masajid regarding Palestine. MashaAllah, every day and definitely every Jum'ah, we are going to hear, du'as for Palestine, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all of those du'as. But what does seem to have taken place is that in this 18 months plus of 18 months of the genocide, is that the discussion about Palestine seems to be, at least in my community, it seems to, my community of Johannesburg, it seems to be waning. We're not hearing as much about it as before, and this is a problem. It seems as if people are fatigued, both the imams and perhaps the musallis, the audiences. And right now, I don't think any of us can be complaining about fatigue over Palestine, because we're not living in a land where basically $50 million American planes are dropping down, 100-pound bombs over our heads.
Yeah, Anwar, this is an area that we have been engaging with actively. And firstly, I think, as I've been saying repeatedly, to make a wide-scale judgment on this would be incorrect without all the facts. To what extent is it being spoken about, or to what extent is it not being spoken about? And again, from region to region, this could differ considerably. Uh, but I reflect on what one of my teachers had said, that uh, what is very essential at this moment in time, what is essential at all moments in time is, capitalizing on especially the Jumu'ah platform. This is one time in the week where you have all the community, and people generally take very seriously the kind of directives that come from the member, if it's well articulated, if it's well prepared, and it sounds to be credible. So we need to then interrogate whether the Juma platform is being used adequately to be able to discuss the issue. And over a period of time, I've come to a certain amount of conclusions relating to this particular point, whereby, for example, as the Palestine Information Network or certain structures that we've worked in tandem with, like the United Ulama Council of South Africa, to be able to prepare common lectures, a common lecture on 1 year on genocide, a common lecture relating to the starvation in Gaza, whatever the case may be. It's not so much a case of having information that's available. It goes down to other root factors that need to be discussed relating to whether Palestine is features in the masjid or not. Number one is the acculturation of the imam. A person comes from a particular background himself. How engaged is that person as an individual with the causes of the ummah? How engaged is that individual, or how educated is that particular individual relating to the causes of the ummah? The other thing is something like dua that you've mentioned can become sometimes even dua does not feature. And the question here is an imam leaving out dua for Gaza deliberately, or has dua generally become routine? There's so many things that have become routine and ceremonial, unfortunately, lacking the required meaning. So just as we might critique the lack of Palestine, there are so many other issues that do not feature in the dua that are very relevant to communities. There are so many issues that do not feature in the khutbah that is very relevant to the communities. The third issue is fear. And here we need to break the fear. So people would say, I want, if I'm going to be talking about this, isn't this considered to be support for a quote unquote extremist or terrorist group, etc.? In a country like South Africa, this should not feature at all. You were present, others were present when the ANC, in way back in probably 2015, hosted Hamas in South Africa. The likes of Khalid Mishal were hosted in South Africa. So whether they may shirk away from it slightly today or not, the fact of the matter is that they are not a proscribed, Hamas is not a proscribed terrorist organization in South Africa, and there's nothing illegal to talk about, even under international law, support for an armed resistance against an occupation. Another point would be the emotive, many times our leaders would speak about Palestine in a very emotive way, bereft of deeper substance, or some of our respected scholars would engage would be fearful or would not feel confident enough to engage with politics. And this then says we can provide all the material in the world, but if a person themselves or within themselves does not feel confident enough to be able to engage with politics, they're not going to speak about it. So this now speaks about upskilling our leaders to be able to speak of these subjects with confidence and bereft, with the necessary emotion, but not totally relying on emotion. What I want to emphasize is we're not saying, and I think if anybody says I want a khatib to each and every week stand up there and his whole khutbah for week on week after end is only about Palestine, I think that is not practical, and that's a call not to be made. There are many other pertinent issues that communities are facing. So we are saying speak about whatever needs to be spoken about, but in a time like this, Palestine should not be absent. Dedicate a few minutes, or whatever topic you are speaking about, make sure there's some creative way you use to be able to inject Palestine into that khutbah. But I think this is a serious call for whatever the reasons. Whether it's apathy, which would be quite serious, whether it is disconnect from the ummah, whether it is a lack of information, whatever the cause may be, this is a moment of leadership. This is a moment where people are looking for leadership. They've seen the pitfalls in other areas of the solidarity movement, whether it comes through the injection of LGBT ideology or liberal ideology. But then if that vacuum is not being met with leadership from a place which is sacred, then we are losing a moment at a great time of crisis.
Building on the positive points that we'd mentioned, the fact that South Africa has taken a very strong geopolitical stance against Israel. I'd like to maybe end us off on a positive note. So this is a Pew Research Forum released a poll recently. The headline here is How Americans View Israel and the Israel-Hamas War at the Start of Trump's Second Term. And just reading from the website, I'm not going to go into the intricacies of the poll itself, but as Americans look at the Middle East, fewer say the Israel-Hamas war is important to them personally or important to US national interests than felt that way earlier last year, according to a new Pew Research Center survey. In addition, the public's views of Israel have turned more negative over the past 3 years. More than half of US adults, 53%, now express an unfavorable opinion of Israel, up from 42% in March 2022 before the Hamas attack of October 7, 2023. So we see that in spite of, the genocidal Zionist regime trying to capitalize and weaponize the events of October 7th to gain sympathy, it has in fact had the opposite effect. In the last 3 years, an 11% increase in Americans being critical of Israel. This is for us a sign that there's a positive trajectory to this. And I believe Brother Arshad spoke about this earlier, how there are certain similarities between the resistance towards Zionism and the resistance towards apartheid. And I think we are seeing a very positive change in trajectory. This is the Gallup poll. Also, less than half in US now sympathetic towards Israelis. Although Americans remain more likely to say their sympathies in the Middle East situation are with Israelis rather than Palestinians, the 46% expressing support for Israel is the lowest in 25 years of Gallup's annual tracking of this measure. So I believe there is a a positive trend internationally. We see even in the United States that American right-wing pundits are now being pushed into a corner where they have to start interrogating things like AIPAC's role in American politics, Israeli interference in American politics, and the free speech, the censorship that's occurring in the United States now. So people like Steven Crowder, who was an ardent Zionist, has now started questioning AIPAC's role and started questioning all of the amount of the money that Americans send to Israel. People like Charlie Kirk, who's a very vehement Zionist, is now saying there's a problem with the censorship that's going on. So even those Zionist pundits on the American right are now being pushed into a corner where they have to start conceding certain points. So I believe this is a positive trend. Sheikh Ebrahim and Brother Arshad, what are your thoughts on this? Is optimism misplaced? Or is this something that we should perhaps build on as a tool in our activism by sort of celebrating these victories and amplifying these in order to infuse in people a sort of positivity and a willingness to contribute to resistance and solidarity?
On that point, definitely the public opinion worldwide, globally, has shifted to a large extent more to the support of the Palestinian just cause and against the Israeli hasbara and propaganda and the twisting the narrative and openly lying to the world. I mean, until now, when we see Israelis telling the world, no, there were beheaded babies on October 7th and rapes and all of this, only to show the world later that is exactly what they intend to do and that what they are doing. So like you said, those that perhaps traditionally supporting them are starting to question, and many turn against them. I met somebody from Mauritius recently at a broad meeting for Palestine, and he was saying how active they are in Mauritius for Palestine, and so I think this issue is capturing the hearts and minds of people all over the world. I so much want to concur what Shaykh Ebrahim said now in terms of how we use the mimbars. Definitely there are pertinent and important issues, relevant issues, and that is how every khutbah should be. It should be relevant to what is happening in the community, but there shouldn't be a khutbah that is absent of at least a message, or even if it's a 3 or 5 minute message of what we can do, what has been happening, just to uplift and just to push and inject that positivity and that hope and that iman and yaqeen about this cause into the community. The masjids can do. Some masjids have been doing great, but I think to a large extent, I think most masjids can do much more. We haven't seen, for example, the masjids have a little Palestine board up and having youth and youngsters updating that board every week. We don't see, I see sometimes, I like what Shaykh Ebrahim said about the issue of leadership. I think traditionally also, imams have been put on such a big throne, almost, quote unquote, perhaps I don't like that word, but I mean, sometimes we fear that if we putting people under us into leadership positions, that it might, start be a threat to our leadership. But I always tell imams when I get to engage with them that if you, groom and make many leaders under you, you become even greater leader. So I think that this is what masjid should do. Let a youngster in the community research, and once a week, come and stand up after Maghrib and give the community a little update on what is happening. I think the masjids can be so much more effective, so much more creative. I think the Muslim community, because of our apartheid background, and that is why we resonate so loudly with this apartheid occupation there. So we've become such an insular community. We just look inward, and we're afraid to sometimes speak, confidently to those outside of our community. we need to recognize this. We need to recognize this firstly, and we need to it's taken long for our own activists to push small boundaries. I think our activists now, when I saw them this week confronting some of the DA officials in meetings in Cape Town, because we are seeing it on videos coming out of the US and how they are doing this to the US politicians. So I think even our activists, are starting taking long to come up because of the nature and background of our people. But I think it's time for us as a Muslim community to start pushing more boundaries in a good way, and that is how we going to do more, and not wait. I'm going to wait till somebody makes the call. I'm going to wait till somebody else takes the first step. I think there's something for everyone to do here. There's a role for everyone, and we need to be more assertive, more positive, and take initiative. Take initiative. There's a bigger role for South Africans to play. Recently, I heard Palestinian leaders were saying that we really appreciate what you guys are doing on the outside. You guys are doing a lot of great work in all these communities, but we need to do much more. Exactly for the reason that of where we are at this moment in the genocide, in this moment in the starvation, in this moment of complicity of so many countries and people around the world. We that are on the right side, we need to do so much more. Jazakumullah khair.
What can we do as South African Muslims and South Africans in general to support the resistance and not shy away from the resistance? I remember early in 2023, just after the genocide started, I was at the protest and I was very happy to be there. And I proudly held my Hamas placard and with the emblem of Hamas, and at the bottom it had written there, Islamic resistance movement, resisting Zionist occupation, injustice, and apartheid, along those lines. And was no problem. Generally, the protests that I attended with that placard, and I used to see others with similar kinds of placards. And one day, while I was at Rosebank Mall here in Johannesburg, in the early days of the genocide, with that placard protesting, a Muslim came up to me and said, "Please put that down. It's making people uncomfortable." And I refused politely. And later on, after the protest, I had a conversation with that particular Muslim brother. And unfortunately, while it was a good, frank conversation, unfortunately, the brother's attitude was one like, we can't antagonize, non-Muslims who may be joining us. And I said, no, this is a moment of education. So what are the things that we need to be doing to create that friendly atmosphere for the resistance movements, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and others within this country, and not have a Palestine solidarity movement on the ground that is turning its face towards the Palestinian Authority, which has sold out the Palestinians?
I feel that there's three things that can be done. There would be, perhaps direct ways or to be able to show one's assistance for the resistance, but this would be dictated by the calls from the resistance itself, and guidance should be taken from what the resistance says themselves. But now, number one would be to be able to change, shift the discourse. I think these may be just one of many, a few of many other actions that can be suggested, but this is what comes to mind currently. One would be to shift the discourse from one of victimhood, and that the Palestinian crisis is purely a humanitarian disaster. There's still too many people who would think that Palestine is only a humanitarian disaster. Yes, we cannot sit idle when people are starving. No doubt. Nobody's saying don't respond to that. But the example that's perpetually given is somebody's beating the hell out of a person, and we just continue to give the victim water and give the victim plasters and give the victim something to eat, but we're not doing anything to be able to stop stop the actual beating and the actual harm taking place. So that's a shift that requires to happen in many people's minds who limit the type of assistance that can be given to Gaza purely to humanitarian aid, purely to spiritual interventions, without looking at the need to be able to physically stop the oppression. I think, secondly, you've touched on this point, which is Oslo, and the fact that a lot of our solidarity, mainstream solidarity, still operates within some of the parameters that were set by the Oslo process, and not
Like a
recognizing,
two-state
and
solution,
I'm
as
not
an
talking.
example.
Yes, and not recognizing that the Palestinian Authority is a creation of the Oslo process. This is not to say, and I always make the differentiation, that Fatah is a part of Palestinian political life. Its leadership, yes, has been severely compromised, but Fatah is a broad church that involves many sincere-minded activists, and some of them are fighting on the ground in Gaza with the Qassam and the Islamic Jihad as we speak. But recognizing how Oslo has influenced our solidarity is very critical to delve into that history. And lastly, I think South Africa, this is where we should revisit South African history in a South African context and look at the sacrifices of freedom fighters, armed freedom fighters in South Africa, and those who were part of the different resistance movements in South Africa, how they went underground, how they went into the neighboring states. And in that way, it's also because, I mean, even the South African government shies away nowadays, from direct affiliation with Hamas. You could see this a number of times in terms of how it responded to questions, or obviously, understandably so, but in the wake of what was thrown its way after the ICJ case. And to show that this is not something that's distant from our own history, and therefore revisiting our own history would serve the strategic purpose of also resonating with the goals of the resistance in Palestine, in my view.
I like what Sheikh Ibrahim Gabriel's at many of the events for Palestine when he comes to speak about Hamas, and then you would say Hamas is not. Let me make it very clear that Hamas is not a terrorist organization, and he would break down the words and he would say, what does Hamas stand for? And then he would say it stands for Haraka al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya. It's a movement of people. It is a resistance movement, and it is based in the values of Islam. So I think we need to perhaps look at messages and articles, to spread, the real face, the true face of who Hamas is to our community and abroad, so people can know them, not only from biased Israeli supported sources, but from themselves and us that support them. I mean, the Youth for Al-Quds, the Hamas logo on my T-shirt here, that we've also started a brand called Liberation Wear. So people, there are many creative ways that youth organizations and others can do to show to continue to show their support and to dispel the untruths that they are a terrorist organization. No, they are far from that. I mean, we know only the Zionist entity in this situation are the terrorists, and then. Yes, I think we need to dispel the untruths. We need to be creative in our support for them, not shy away of speaking, about them to our audiences and to people that we meet.
The great leader and founder of Hamas, Islamic Resistance Movement, Sheikh Ahmed Ismail Yassin, may Allah be pleased with him. Based on his studies of the Quran and his reflection and intense study and contemplation of the Quran, he held an opinion, and only Allah knows best. He held an opinion that the Zionist Israeli apartheid state of Israel would collapse in about the year 2027. And I want you guys to share your views with me that if it's now 2027 or close by, and Alhamdulillah, Israel has fallen. We are literally seeing now the liberation of the whole of Palestine and its creme de la creme, its crown jewel, Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak. Now what happens? This is a great victory for humanity generally, but it's a great victory for the Ummah specifically. What is the aftermath of Palestine? Shaykh Ebrahim.
Anwar, I don't think you'd end up the show with such a curveball. Firstly, I'll push back at the question and I'll say Palestine is not yet liberated. So let's concentrate on our efforts. We are absolutely confident that it will, and we'll see those scenes, inshallah. But for the moment, the priority is not so much about envisioning that or soaking in that glorious moment as much as it is to fulfill that Islamic obligation of that moment, which is one of the highest objectives of the Sharia, which is to save human lives. But in answering that question, I think we understand the importance of tarbiyah. So we are at an inflection point in this world, as so many of our great thinkers and great engaged scholars have pointed out, that this is a moment that could go in any way. This is we see the weakness of the Israelis, we see the weakness of the American empire, we see the world yearning for a new vision of justice. But we also are fully aware that how many a time have people reached the apex of supposedly attaining their freedom, and it was stolen from them. So this is the importance of building structures to be able to inherit the future that we seek, and having the tarbiyah, so that when one comes to positions of authority, الذين إن مكناهم في الأرض قاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأمروا بالمعروف ونهوا عن المنكر. That kind of idea. But one final thought would be instructive from the story of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, where and from the lifetime of the Nabi of Allah, إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح, that when the Mufassirin described that the Fath was not the Fath of Makkah physically happened thereafter, but the Fath actually predated that with the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and the people were entered into Islam in leaps and bounds. And Sheikh Umar Sulaiman has emphasized this particular point as well in his recent engagements, that this is a moment for bringing people to the justice of Islam. We should feel that pain, a kind of pain, that there are so many well-meaning people around the world who have really stood up for justice, but they haven't completed this journey in terms of embracing the holistic light of Islam. So to answer that question, once Palestine is liberated, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi stood at the coast of Palestine, looked towards Europe and said, I wished that the Almighty had given me enough ships and enough manpower to return to Europe, follow these crusaders to Europe, and make the entirety of Europe see the light of Islam, see the guidance of Islam. So our goal is not just the liberation of a piece of land, but it's the liberation of the minds and hearts, so that people can embrace the totality and the beauty of Islam. And that would obviously be the priority now, and more so the priority even after the liberation.
In the words of Dr. Abdullah Ma'ruf, a scholar on the issue of Islamic Jerusalem studies, he says one of the rewards of the liberation of Masjid al-Aqsa and this blessed and sacred land is that because it represents the heart of the world and the heart of the Ummah, and because it is now filled with oppression and darkness and occupation, that once it is freed, inshallah ta'ala, soon from that, and it is a city that is guided by the light of Islam and by the justice and the values of Islam, then that will then spread throughout the world. So I think it will spread, inshallah ta'ala, to the countries just surrounding it, because we know it's so many of the countries right surrounding Palestine is also engulfed in oppression and darkness, whether it's from leadership and values, and so. And I think that this peace and light and guidance will then spread. And I think that is also, like Shaykh Ebrahim rightfully said, that we should see that as our duty. It is our duty and our responsibility to working for Palestine means spreading the values of Islam, spreading the light and the beauty and the guidance of Islam. And that is what, this Medina al-Quds, Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak, and the cause of Palestine represents. It is replacing the darkness and of occupation and oppression and genocide and apartheid with the beautiful values of Islam, of justice and light and guidance and blessings and good for humanity. So we should embody that, and because this is what this city and this place will spread to the world, inshallah, after that liberation, which is coming so soon. Allahumma ameen ya rabbal alameen. Hayakum Allah wa
اللهم
assalam.
ارزقنا صلاة في المسجد الأقصى وغفور العزيز. آمين.
Ameen,
Allahumma
Ameen,
ameen.
inshallah.